23 men, 2 days, Gemini Bridge, and Fins and Things trails in Moab, Utah. Rigs crawling over red rocks, tires finding impossible lines, grown men laughing like teenagers in a hot tub. On paper, it was an off-roading trip, but Chad Dunford built something deeper. He created space for men to actually connect, not just coexist, to be vulnerable without being weak, to support without being asked. Most men are lonely. They have acquaintances, not brotherhood. They have surface conversations, not real connection. Chad's trying to change that one adventure at a time. This is Find Your Challenge. Chad, it's great to see you. Thank you for being on the Find Your Challenge podcast. And let's just say I'm just incredibly honored that you take a few minutes out of your afternoon to talk about a great shared experience that we had a couple of weeks ago. Thanks. Welcome. How are you, man?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you and I have a lot of shared experiences.
We have a lot of shared experieriences,
many,
not in a weird way.
One of the many. No, I'm grateful. Yeah, thank you very much.
So one of the things I'm sitting here thinking about, this is maybe going to sound strange talking about. I was like sitting here thinking about, sitting in a hot tub with you and 20 other dudes at 11 o'clock at night, talking about real things. Right. And, I just wanted to compliment you. You built something incredible, a couple weekends ago when we all went down to Moab. Let's start with this simple question. Like, what was it in your mind that said like, hey, I'm going to organize a massive trip to go off-roading in Moab?
Sure. Well, not to get too much into, too distant of history, but, I think something like this has just kind of always been sitting in my brain. I think some of the real prominent things that stand out to me was, I was in architecture school, over 20 years now. And I had to read this book as part of the curriculum, I think it was called The Not So Small House. And it was talking about the demographics of housing and families and all that kind of stuff. And it talks about how families are basically separating, and, they're getting their own rooms, they're getting their own TVs, they're getting, in some cases, their own, kitchenettes and stuff in their own homes. And it just occurred to me as the architect, it wasn't giving any kind of social commentary. It was just the nature of architecture. And it struck me as how families are kind of just naturally being drawn apart, even in the buildings we live in. And I just started thinking about families, and my family is super important to me. I grew up in a family that just it was kind of challenged, and I think I picked up a hobby of watching families that succeeded. And families that succeed spend time together. And I realized that, through personal experiences with my dad and through different, leadership experiences, I just realized that, there was a challenge there, especially in men's lives. You and I, we have a lot of daughters, and I think
we've got a lot of daughters
like between us. And I think it's easier to be sensitive about some of those challenges. We, as a family, we read that book, Girls on the Edge, and there's a companion book to that called Boys Adrift. And it just really illustrates the challenges that boys have and consequently men have in socializing. And it really just occurred to me a couple of years ago, like, hey, I moved away from one of my favorite things in Moab, and I'm around all these people, all these men with Jeeps and all kinds of, wilderness and manly ambitions. And this is something that I can connect to, and this is a great excuse to connect other people to. And so it started small. It started with 3 people, and came to what we are today.
This year is year number
4.
4 years. So I've been there for the 2 of the 4. That's fantastic. Yeah. And part of it is like, just to share, like, between the 2 of us, we have 10 kids and an 80% girl situation, right?
It's correct.
And you're 100% girl, and I'm only, 60% girl. But how does that play into it in terms of you're wanting to connect with men, right? Wanting to have that, is that like, and you have done, of one of my heroes of like being able to engage your family, have them do cool, fun things. Like, that is not a problem in the Dunford house. But how do those things come together?
I initially would have, if I were early on in my marriage, I would say, oh, it's to do manly things, right? Because I'm surrounded by women. But I don't, as they've aged and as I've aged, I realize I don't have those kind of draws. Like, I just love being around people. And I think there's things that I'm naturally inclined towards. And so, um, the off-roading, the backcountry, the climbing, the rappelling, all the things that we do and those adventures that we do are just an offshoot of what we do,
Right. Yeah.
And luckily, my two daughters that are at college just got hired at Beaver Mountain today. So, I mean,
That's incredible. Go on.
so like,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's things that we do and as a family, and this is just an extension of that. And I think this is kind of plays into, I don't want to get into this too early, but this plays into what we talked about on the trip of, I think all men, all people, all individuals have talents. I think they come to this life with a bag of experience, and it's kind of imperative on each of us to find out what's in that bag and to share the better parts of ourselves. And I hope that if anything that comes out of this, I hope that that's what people are looking for.
As an organizer of a trip, right? Like there's probably a decision-making process of who you invite, and their individual responses. I know my response, has always been like, yes, immediately. I want to be the first person to make sure that I get my RSVP in so I get to go. But we made a comment, I think, in the trip at one point that said, like, some people are like that and some people are like, you're going. You were just told them to go, right? And to just talk a little bit about that experience of like the invitation and the responses, because it's probably a pretty wide range with 20 different guys going. Like, what's the total? What is it? 23? Is that the number? I'm trying to remember what the final
23 count. It ended up being, I think, 21 individuals.
21 and yeah, right. So like, what were some of the responses? What were some of the things that you had to overcome to get all those guys there?
Yeah, it's really interesting. When it first started, of course, it's your friends that you're the tightest with, the friends that you've had these conversations, like you and I have talked about, backcountry driving, our whole friendship.
Yeah.
And so, that there's a certain commonality there that you share with people. With others, like, guilt is a definite motivator.
For most men. For most men.
And the thing that's really funny about it is I've kind of matured in this whole thing because, and I guess surprisingly, so this has been a journey for me too, where like it just started out, I can bring all of my friends, and all of your friends kind of turns out to be, in my case, I don't know, easily, 10, 12 people that I can pull out of a hat. Well, with this many people, you're kind of going to the next level of friendships. And in this group, we had three sons. Yeah. And we had some extra people there. We had a brother there. And I think what it turns into is something that kind of grows out of people's appreciation for what it is. And I think the thing that I've learned is to ask myself, what do I want out of it?
Right.
Because now it's not just Chad and his closest buddies.
Right.
It's now Chad and something else. And I kind of accidentally turned myself into a leader, right? I didn't necessarily seek out to do that. It was more of a shared experience. And now, definitely this trip was definitely, I realized having my son-in-law there for our first trip together, I realized like I kind of neglected him, because because I was a trip leader, right? And so like that's something I've got to evaluate going forward, and how to have that trip define those moments and those memories in a way that's lasting and that is passionate for me. Because the last thing I want to do is turn this into a job, right?
Right. Yeah. What do you want out of it? You set yourself up for that one, right? Like you gave yourself a softball on that. Like how, and I guess what do you want out of it? And the follow-up maybe question that I'll ask before you answer is, maybe there's another guy out there that's listening, said like, that would be really fun, right? Like, how do I go about conceptualizing, like organizing? Maybe it's 4, maybe it's 6, maybe it's 10, maybe it's 20 guys, right? Like just kind of give them some of your hot tips from having done this for 4 years of how to make this approachable for the average dude out there?
Sure. I think the biggest thing for me is doing a lot of those decisions in advance. And I think for most men, we live to the limit, right? We live scheduled. Not a lot of us have a lot of free time, and that free time is scheduled, right?
Right.
And for someone who has limited time off too, I'm super sensitive to that. So I would say, eliminate a lot of the ambiguity. And so that's why one of those trails is always going to be the same. The second trail is going to be something a little bit spicier, a little bit something that we can adapt to the crowd a little bit. But also like where we eat, where we stay, those decisions are just made because they're known to me, and they take out the question, right? They take out the risk, I guess. Like the hotel we stayed at, not the nicest place, right? I mean, but certainly it was clean, convenient,
that's fantastic.
easy. And
it was a bunch of guys stacked in a hotel room, which is safe.
Right. And it just it kind of recreates kind of that scouting, guys in a tent, at summer camp feeling.
Right.
That I love, right? That's something I have in my history that I'm passionate about. But and it just kind of recreates that as an adult. And so yeah, just trying to get the decisions there, really, really trying to keep it simple. I mean, really, when we go to the grocery store, we go on a trail, and we go to dinner, and then everything else in the day is open. And so I try to keep it just as simple as possible, because in our last day when we were leaving, we could have rigged that arch and done a swing.
Yeah.
Like we could have climbed that. It wouldn't have been a problem. We had all the gear there, but it just seemed like it took away from the experience. And I don't think that we lost anything by not doing it.
Yeah.
So, you can always do more, right? You can always cram it with high adventure. You can always cram it with, risk and thrill and memory. But I don't think that it makes those feelings better. I think it might be a net negative rather than a net positive.
Right. And I think the key principle, especially for a bunch of dudes, is like, just keep it simple, right? Like, unless let it fill in. Is there a time leading up to the event or during the event where you clenched a little bit and like, oh, this is not going to work?
Right.
This is a bad idea, right? Like, is do it as the trip leader, as the guy, right? Any experiences there?
Yeah. So, last year was one of the ones. Well, in a very risky environment, right? I mean, this is innately a very risky situation,
right? And the follow up in there is like, why off-roading, why jeeping, right? As opposed to like golf or fishing or some sort of art tour, right? Like what? Go ahead.
Well, part of it too is I don't want to bring any sexism into this, so I want to be really careful with it. But it is manly, right? It is. There's a certain feeling of adrenaline and a fulfillment that comes from that dopamine dump, and my kids, my daughters, and my wife, they're great off-road drivers. They've shared that experience with us. I think the things that really kind of keep me up at night is just the realities of the risk. Yeah. And I think when you go with like back to that analogy of like your 12 buddies or your 5 buddies, like that risk is mitigated by the relationship, right?
Right.
This trip, we had people that I didn't know, right? We had people that I had met for the first time when they showed up to the first morning. And so because driving comes naturally to me, and because I've done it so much and over so many years, like I have an understanding and even, I guess, even to an extent, some professional training, but I have an understanding of how to mitigate and how to manage those risks. For me, the scary part is somebody that steps up to, like on fins and things, on that last wall.
Yeah.
That wall scares me because it has a left-hand drift that if a person doesn't understand the kinetics of it, they're in the ditch, right? They're rolled over. And so for me, it's both providing the opportunity and the exposure to that risk, but then controlling it in a way, okay, set up here, get set up, angle. So you kind of try and get them oriented towards what some of the risks are. And So yeah, for definitely the time against the risk is super spooky. And then the other thing that was actually super stressful was putting people in rooms together, right? Because that's part of it that's super out of the norm for men. Like
Right.
we isolate, right? Like
Right.
even we have our own cars and we have our own offices and
Right.
we have our things. And putting a bunch of guys in a room together for some is a challenging thing.
Right.
So
Right. What made it what made it work? Like what are the best things? Like we'll dig a little bit as we go into this, but like set up the positive thing. Like what's the best energy moment, or why do you love it?
yeah, that's easy for me. So they've done studies of people that go on vacation,
Nice.
and they've discovered that the planning and the lead up and the anticipation, and then the after trip and the memories and the photographs and the videos, those are far more mentally and emotionally rewarding than the trip itself. Even the trip, even though you're on the beach or you're on the mountain or you're out in the cool air, it's the reliving of those moments that create the pleasure center of
Right.
that. And one of the things, as I've done a lot of backcountry stuff, is I always make a trip video pretty soon afterwards because
Yeah.
it hits on that, right? You feed on it. And so for me, like providing a trip that men would not naturally do on
Right.
their own. I've had, I mean, we've been off the trip now. What is it? 3 weeks almost.
Yeah.
I have been emotional with some of the feedback that I've gotten from some people. For some people, it's been life changing. I mean, last year, one of the guys that came going through a really hard life experience, he texted me on the drive out of town and said, "This trip may have saved my life," you know, and I don't, I don't take those compliments lightly. I mean, and they're not so much about me as much as exposing people to something that you can do, right?
What?
I think
Right.
that, we're amazing creatures. And, back to that whole bag of talents and abilities, like I think we come, even people who are broken, even people who have challenges and health problems, all those types of things, they have something to give. And I think this is a vehicle to be able to express those and be able to expose those to rigor and excitement. And I think it's just a good thing.
Yeah.
It's been a good thing. It
It's
feels,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Finish your sentence.
It feels rewarding. It really does. It just feels rewarding top to bottom when you know, there's a Shakespeare quote. It's kind of in a negative context, but I kind of live, it's one of the pillars I live by, but it's taken from, I'll just use, uh, the name is Thais.
Mhm.
And it says, "What win I when I gain the thing I seek?" And he's using it as a negative connotation because he's about to do something horrendous. But I think that that's something that I've like thought about as I kind of extrapolate life's experiences. What do I win? Like, what do I gain? And I
Right.
think the memories and the connections and the life experience and the depth of this experience is just, it's immeasurable, really. At this point, at 4 years in, the experience is almost more addicting than the off-roading.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
One of the things that's been great, you had mentioned sons. I took my two sons with two of the 20% of our children, and I think I've watched them. I've seen how they have interacted, and you had said the photos and the experiences are the thing that's the most important. And the other day, I was looking at my wall, and I had recently just printed some 8x10s of lots of different kind of cool things. And I was looking up, and most of those photos of me and my sons were from those trips. Like,
Wow.
and I was like,
Wow.
that was amazing to me. Right. And I looked at Peter, my youngest son, and Jonas, my oldest son, and, the ability to see, like, to have them build confidence from last year to this year, right? To watch Peter kind of define himself like, hey, I'm wearing a Jeep t-shirt, right? Like he
Right.
kind of, as a 16-year-old, like that's really, really important to him. And to see those two guys bond together is really important as well.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that's it's an amazing thing. And like to have him talk about like, and to have the confidence for both of them this year to drive, right? Like
Yeah.
that was a really, really proud dad moment that
Sure.
helped facilitate. So
For sure. Awesome. Well, I'm so glad. I love those guys. I love getting to know them personally. You know, I've known them their whole lives.
yeah.
And it's nice to get to know them as adults. I like that.
So Chad, the Moab trip proved that something works. 21 of 23 men showed up for this, and they left differently than they arrived.
Clear. 66 invites went out.
66 invites. Okay, that's a number that hasn't. So 66. So you have a 1/3 conversion rate, which is not bad for
not bad, right?
Not bad on that. But there's a bigger question of like why this is necessary. Like you love it. You love to be on the adventure, hang out and be with your friends. You had mentioned earlier, like people have texted you and you've had a pretty solid response of like this trip has been life changing. It's been important for the Stringham family. Like I love it. I plan on going every year as long as I'm one of the 66 to get the invite. Why do you think men struggle so much to connect?
That is an awesome question, and probably a question I'm not worthy to answer, other than just from my own life experience. I think I've seen men. Well, you and I have talked about this quite a bit, but like, my dad just passed away in April, and you know, my mom asked me who are your dad's friends, you know, and I really couldn't name them. You know, I could name who his relationships were.
Right.
My dad didn't go out and hang out with people. My dad didn't he didn't even really go play golf. He had brothers that he spent time with, you know, once or twice a year, but he didn't have friends that he counseled, that he spent time with. And that struck me just really, really powerfully. And, you know, I have the luxury of having, you know, a handful of really, really close friends that, you know, the type of friends you'd call if you needed to bury a body, you know, that type of friendship.
Yeah.
And and I think that's a powerful thing to have, you know, in my case, 3 to 5 men that are just always have your back.
Right.
And that is a really rare thing in this world. And I think one of the life principles that I live by, I look at kind of popular culture, I look at media, and I'm sensitive to those types of things. I like to read and listen to things that are counterculture to me, you know,
Wow.
and I like to pay attention to the things that they talk about. And I think you and I live in a generation where men have been degraded for most of our lives, if not all of our lives, you know, where, you know, not to degrade media or entertainment. I mean, people making choices, but like Homer Simpson, for example, right? Total doofus, really a bad dad. You know, I mean, he showed up at moments, right? He shows up in moments, but he's a makes bad choices, right?
Right.
And misses the important moments in life. And I think that media kind of glorifies that. And I think that on the opposite side of that, they take macho men, you know, the big muscles and the testosterone fueled, you know, thing, and they put those at polar opposites of one another. It's either or. And men are just not that way. I mean, men cover that entire spectrum of that. And then you age those men in different segments of that same cross section, and you just get infinitely variable human beings. And I think that's what I'm interested in, is that variability. I'm interested in people's just texture, and I'm interested in connecting to the texture, not driving texture. Does that make sense? Like, I don't want to color anybody. I don't want to make somebody they're not. I want to expose who they are to something.
Right. So on the follow up to that, like you had mentioned fatherhood, we're talking about men's relationships here, but
Yeah.
you'd mentioned that, and I want to ask that, like, and I say this with all respect, like, I consider you, of all of my friends and family, and there I have lots, like, one of the best examples of what
Mm.
fatherhood should look like, right? Like, you are dialed in. I'm just curious, like, from your own personal side, what are couple of the principles that you use to rule your life to become to be a great father? Because you won't say that you're a great father, but I'm looking from the outside in, like, I would definitely say you're one of my top examples of, like, inclusiveness and all of those. And how do those relate back to the men's relationships as well?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the compliment.
Yeah.
But I think men are purposeful. I think men pay attention. Good fathers pay attention,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they listen to what's going on. And I think that the inclination really is to like be selfless and to give that all away. But I think that there's a certain level of the concept of you can't give away what you don't have. Right?
Right.
So if a father is unhealthy, if a father is tired, if a father is battered, I think he's not a good father, right? He's and maybe that's the metaphor that something like Homer Simpson's teaching, right? That
Right. Right.
you're overworked and underappreciated, and you're not a good father. Maybe that's the lesson to be learned. But I think that these events give a lot of meaning and a lot of purpose, and they spark a lot of things. And that was the thing that I was kind of talking to you about. It's amazing what this trip sparked in people's lives.
Yes. Yeah.
And
That was gonna be my follow up right there. Right. Like, I think it was even just last night when as we're getting ready, like, talk about some of the upside, right? Like,
right.
what have you heard and seen from that is building?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it for men in our time frame is business, right? Business opportunities, people that you can trust, people that you can see kind of an exposed side of, that you can kind
Yeah.
of see a personality like, oh, that type of risk, or that type of planning, or that type of, whatever, insert whatever thing that you see as valuable. You think, oh, I want to learn more about that. But I think one of the things that uh shocked me was, Pat on our trip,
Yeah.
not to name names, but 76 years old, 77 years old. And he told me afterwards, he was so worried that he would be, excluded, or that he would suffer because of his age. And Pat was just such an incredible part of the whole thing. And, part of the parts that I really enjoyed were when Pat was right there in the middle of it. And I think, you know, exposing somebody who's 76, 77 years old to a situation that, he takes that and shows it to his sons, and like, Dad still got it, right?
Got it.
Dad still got it.
Right? Say that was one of my favorite moments of the trip, is where we were going up that hike on Sunday, right? And I was like, I mean, maybe not the best choice for all of us, but, like, you saw 21 dudes, like, all come together and make sure everybody made it safely up there. Like, that was really, like, that. I really enjoyed that moment and that experience, and seeing people, like, that's the challenge, right? Like, that's the essence of this, like, is finding your individual challenge. And, like, people probably who on Friday probably wouldn't have done that, but by Sunday they were like, yeah, we're going to make this work, and give them that little confidence and that little boost to be able to go and do something else great the next day or the day after. Right.
Right. I feel the same way about rappelling and climbing. I mean, it just exposes people in a safe way to something that they would just never do. And it tells something to the person that, they can do something cool, and it's not cool to be judged by other people. It's cool in a way that it gives you purpose. It gives you maybe the confidence to start something else, right? To do something else.
Right.
Right. And I think that's really the benefit of what we're talking about here, is really that platform to say, wow, maybe I don't have to stay home and watch TV, or stay home and look at my four walls. Maybe I can go down a road I've never been down before. Right.
And I get the next follow-up question that like is if someone's listening and they're having this moment of self-awareness, again, drop some Chad Dunford truth bombs here of like, how do I, as a man, we'll go, because we're kind of going like, how do I develop some of those skills, right? How should I be thinking? How should I be interacting? Like, what are some of the things that you would advise just from your life experience?
I would definitely say one of the most important things that a person can do is find the things that you're passionate about.
Right.
You know, that's my dad doesn't have a lot of words of wisdom that he gave me in life, but when I was in school, he told me, he said, son, if you'll always do something that you love, that you'll never hate going to work.
Right.
Right. And I always thought that was remarkable. And I think that, you know, being a person who does what I love, both in recreation and for work, matters to me. And I think that so many of us, speaking men specifically, make sacrifices for either work or for time or for marriage or for relationships that maybe aren't totally healthy. So I would just say take an assessment of your days, take an assessment of your time, and make sure you're doing something that you're passionate about. You know, it doesn't matter to me if you're baking bread or hanging off a mountain or reloading 9mm casings. Like
Right.
It doesn't matter to me. Whatever a person is passionate about, I think is really, really important. And I think that I'll give you an example. So I'm artistic. I've been born in an artistic family, and I draw and I create and I draw for a living. Right. And I realized one day in my middle ages, about 10 years ago, that I hadn't even drawn a creative picture in years.
Right.
Because I draw for work. So I neglected it. So I thought, well, I'm just going to start drawing. And so I grabbed a couple of my friends online and on Facebook, and I said, hey, draw with me for 30 days. And it was so interesting to see what came out of that, because it really changed me. And I saw me reconnect to painting, and I reconnected to other people and their creativity. I created to art in general. And it just sparked something in me that I was passionate about, that I had let go. Right. And I think that there's a lot of that too in life, where we just say, well, I don't have time for that, or I could never find time to do that. I think that we're better people when we do. I think we're better employees when we do. I think we're better spouses when we do things that build us up as people. And I've seen that in my own wife. I think that's one of the things that's been important about these trips, is that she loves to drive too. And she's like, well, I want you to get something so big that it excludes me.
Right.
I want to be part of this. But she's been super, super supportive, because I think she sees what it means to build, right? I think it means so much to me, and I become a better husband and a more appreciative father because I do something that I love.
Right. And you've used the word better multiple times, which I love. And
Yeah.
if you the key thing and the theme behind the trip, and we made t-shirts and everything, was betterment, right? Like, so if you break that down, betterment, like all of those fantastic, not a play on words, but like just a fun graphic there of helping to support men become better, right? I think that is the real kind of the key crux of the thing. Dad, again, we spent a lot of time talking about this trip specifically and about trying to get men to connect with one another, but it's not just men, right? Like, we've talked about betterment in that, but let's zoom out a little bit. The conversation is bigger than just that, right? Women struggle with connection.
Mm-hmm.
Our wives struggle with connection. We're not probably saying too much that we shouldn't there. Young people are isolated. I look at my own kids and family and how they are connecting. People are staring at phones most of the time, right? Instead of each other. What are some of the universal principles here in your mind, right? I know we just joked there during the break that like we're never short on words, and probably both of us on opinions. So from one person to a next, one friend to a next, like, what do you think? How do we create supportive communities for all people, not just men, right? Inclusively.
Right. I think this trip really for me is almost an extension of my belief structure. I feel like the biggest thing that a person can do is leave their normal, right?
Right.
Step out of their normal lives, put the phone down as much as you can, and step out and do something. I think that humans are really great at nesting, right? We create these like kind of environments, both in friendships and in our homes, and even in the cars. We drive our own car and we have our things in certain places.
Right.
We nest really, really well, and some of those behaviors are antisocial, right? Social experiences are hard. They we bump up against each other. We misunderstand one another. There's risk, there's embarrassment, all those things. And I think that when we embrace that risk, I think it just comes with such texture and such joy. We have a party that we throw where we have people come and tell stories, just people either out of their lives or things that they wrote. And it's been amazing to watch people risk and kind of stand in front of a group and share some stories, and take that risk. And it really is the risk that's the currency there, right? You're putting yourself out there. And if we don't do that in life, we'll be like my dad. We'll just die alone, right? We'll just die alone. And I don't mean to be dramatic there. I mean, my dad was a great guy and everything, but really we'll just die without that connection. And for me, the things that you and I have done together, this trip specifically, and just the building of something there, it's just priceless. And I think that it's because we step out of the norm, right? We take that risk and it takes us somewhere that we wouldn't have ever foreseen for ourselves.
Right. I think we've been friends. I was just literally just thinking about here, coming up on 20 years. It's got to be close to that, right? Or somewhat right in there. Easily. A little bit more than that, maybe.
A little more, because Marin was born in that neighborhood and she's 23. So
wow. Yeah. So
we're 25.
We shouldn't say things like that, but so how have you grown in those 25 years? Like what are some of the things that you, back to the theme of like, what have you done specifically to challenge yourself to kind of to grow your perspectives and the things that you're thinking about?
Maybe my wife's probably the right person to ask for this, but
let's just do a quick, like, we have awesome wives, right?
For sure.
We have incredible wives that support us and we support them. And like, I think that's a whole nother podcast, but shout out Melissa and Kimberly. So
absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. For sure. Well, I one of the pillars that I live by is to overcome mediocrity. That's something that I guess a mantra that I tell myself is I just don't want to be basic. I don't want to be a person who settles for kind of what that natural human person would tend towards. And so I grew up in a family that was not exposed to college and college expectations. My parents were able to provide an incredible living without college, and I saw my siblings move into life and make lives without the need for college, and I just wanted to do something different. And so it took me till I was 36 years old to graduate from college, and I see that as just an incredible point of pride for me, right? As I just didn't settle, and it's not a criticism of other people, but it's a statement of oneself.
It's it's finding your own challenge. Yeah,
and it's something that you can always live by. Something that I share with you is cycling and love for cycling, and I'm incredibly grateful for that exposure from your side. But I had an experience where I'm compact, shall we say? I'm short and thick, so I've never been a great climber on the bike. I'm extremely durable and can go all day, but I'm not a good climber. And so one year I had read something where it said to train your weaknesses. And so I thought, well, okay, all summer long, I'm just going to climb. And so I would get up in the morning and I would go to Brighton Ski Resort and I would ride around the ski resort and then I would throw myself up against guardsmen, right?
Right.
And for anybody who doesn't know, guardsmen is like a Tour de France level climb. It is
brutal and at 9,000 feet,
Yeah.
climbing to 11,000 feet, right?
So I would do that several times a week and it took me weeks and weeks and weeks. And finally at like walking speed, I reached the summit, right? And great metaphor, right? It's amazing. But the thing about it is the work that it took to get there. I live on that every day.
Right.
I live on that every day. And it's so funny because it's like, I imagine it's somewhere who goes to Everest or, wins a race or any of that kind of thing. Once you accomplish something, you live on it, right? It's a building block and it just tells you that things are possible. And I think I would hope for all people of all genders and all persuasions and all colors that they would find something that they're passionate about and go after it, right? Find that mountain and go after it. And I think there's lessons along the way that are just priceless. They're just priceless. They teach us things about failure and about ourselves, about compassion, about, forgiveness, about hard work, dedication. I think all those things are just so important. And I think they're so valuable in life.
So last question, and we'll wrap it up after this. So for someone out there who's feeling isolated and doesn't have a Chad Dunford in their life, like a blessing that I do have a Chad Dunford in my life, what's their first step, either as an organizer or as a participant to help kind of overcome some of that isolation?
I'll tell you what I'll tell my kids about dating.
Okay, I can't wait.
Okay.
Keep on coming. Here we go.
Nobody, or I should say no boy, nobody's going to turn down a shake and fries.
Right.
Okay. So in your desperation, in your isolation, that's your vehicle.
Yeah.
Right. You find somebody interesting. You find somebody that is maybe they're completely out of your league. Maybe they're an athlete. Maybe they're, super intelligent. Buy them a shake and fries.
Yeah.
And ask them how they got there and ask them, or maybe it's somebody who's also down in the dumps, right? Hey, can we do something together? Anything. Can we do something together? Right. I mean, who knows what'll come out of it? But I think taking that step outside of yourself and using that easy vehicle of shake and fries.
Right. I love that.
Yeah.
This is how you know that we're good parents. Like let's just call it like we're okay at this. It's not, we're maybe like we're going to show a little confidence here because that's the same thing I tell my kids, like, especially the girls. It's like, if you want to go out with someone, ask them out. They're not going to say no, right? Like if you want to do something, don't sit around and wait for someone to call you. Like just go out and do it. Like it's a big step. And I think that's a skill that we're losing for everyone, for all ages, right?
Right. For sure. And, I think you'll find your people, right? You'll find your people for sure. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Chad, this has been really powerful. Thanks for taking a little time out of your afternoon. I know you'd mentioned you've got deadlines to hit.
Yep.
And so I don't know if you want to, go be a Chad Dunford, everyone. Let's just call it that. Create something. Yeah, it's a fantastic way. Let's just create something. Let's go with that. Chad Dunford, 23 men, one weekend in Moab, but it was never about off-roading, right? It was about creating space for real connection in a world that's kind of forgotten how. Chad, thank you for having me be a part of that. Thank you for being a part of this podcast. I think we're gonna make this a regular thing. Like there's a great connection. Go find your own adventure. Shake and fries. No, shake and burger and
Yep. Fries and a
shake. Fries and a shake. I love that. Hashtag fries and a shake. Let's do that. I'm gonna give you one last word, Chad. Anything else you want to drop?
Man, people matter. Let's, for those that are not ambitious and reaching out, find somebody that needs you and make a difference, right? Start that conversation. It matters. In this day and age, people matter.
So here's everyone's challenge. Who are you going to reach out to this week, right? Not a text, not a like, a real conversation, a real plan, maybe even your own adventure. If this episode resonated, please subscribe to Find Your Challenge, share it with someone who needs community, and tell us your story. What's your challenge in building connection? We've got more guests coming up. We're excited. Follow along here. We've got some great stories to tell. Until next time, go find your challenge. Go be great. Thanks, Chad. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks, John.
Yeah. Peace.